The day you've all been waiting for. The positional rankings for the quarterbacks are here, breaking down our 10 best of the position. Before we get to 10, we need to talk about the guys that just missed the list. I'm going to save my big name for last, but...
I'm going to save the one I wanted on there for last.
Okay. Matthew Stafford just missed my list.
Stafford also just missed my list.
And it was really close because I feel like it was a really good year out of Matthew Stafford. And I do feel like because he's a little bit later in his career that he's not getting like the love or the recognition that somebody playing at this point in time in their career, knowing all the injuries that Stafford sustains, I felt like he really rejuvenated himself, and McVay put a core of wide receivers around him to make sure they were set up for success, and Matthew Stafford still had, a plan to be part of that Rams now.
I got to preface this with something, though. So when you see this list, it's hard because guys like Stafford had a good year.
Yeah.
You can argue that he had a top 10 year, but there are guys in this top 10 list that had their best years to date.
Yeah.
Some new people in the league, some new starters that need to be recognized on this list.
For sure.
So there is some placement based off of who had their best year versus who clearly did not have their best year.
Absolutely.
So I'm prefacing that.
No, as you should. T-Law just missed my list.
T-Law wasn't even on just missed.
Jalen Hurts missed my list.
Okay, I don't hate it. I don't hate it.
Is he on your list?
We'll get there.
Okay.
We'll get there.
Jalen Hurts. It's a tough scenario, right? Because I know the Eagles were 9-0, 10-0 to start the year. I just felt like there was a lot of disconnect, and I don't feel like his impact was as strong this year as it was last. I know you could sit here and argue the tush-push, the amount of rushing touchdowns. Think this conversation just is sculpted a little bit differently, and you'll hear why throughout the list. So I apologize for all you Hurts fans in advance.
Steve, it's not crazy. I'm going to tell you a just miss, but Jalen Hurts is my 10.
Okay.
So he is my 10, and the sheer reason is because touchdowns.
Okay.
He had, that is not right. I have that 15. Yes, this is the right one. So he had 15 rushing touchdowns, 23 passing touchdowns. Those are pretty big numbers at the quarterback position, especially with how it was played this year. No one really had ridiculous passing touchdown numbers like we've seen in years past. Seeing the top passing touchdown number in this list be 36 is insane, considering that Tom Brady had a season with 53.
Yeah.
So it's
Peyton Manning 55.
Like exactly.
Mahomes up there. Yeah.
Dude, it's crazy, and all of a sudden they're down. Now this is really starting to show the more mobile aspect of the quarterbacks.
Absolutely.
And that's what needs to be taken into consideration when you're talking about this position now too.
For sure.
At 10, I have Jalen Hurts. The guy that I keep flip-flopping back and forth with is the one that beat his ass in the playoffs. Baker Mayfield just missed.
Oh, no way!
He's the guy that I was like, I desperately wanted Baker in here, but I just looked at the touchdown comparisons here, and seeing Jalen Hurts have 14 more rushing touchdowns than Baker Mayfield is what made me put him above Baker.
I respect it, and I understand the reasoning. I just feel like if I'm going back on last year, I think last year's Baker Mayfield's best season to date, like by far, if you ask me, in his career.
For sure.
I think that you got a glimpse of these quarterbacks going head-to-head, and Baker Mayfield pulled it out in the most important game of the year. Baker Mayfield is my 10 here, and I just feel like if you look at Hurts' season compared to prior years, you include like the touchdowns. There were also, some bad decision-making going on there. There was a lot of controversy coming out of Philly, whereas everybody and their mother had anything to say about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and counted them out before the season started, and he proved them wrong.
He did.
And that's exactly why Baker Mayfield deserves to be on this list. So I'm going to break it down real quick with a 94.6 passer rating. That's a great number. The rushing, look, we talked about, the rushing impact of Baker a little bit when we were talking about Rachaad White in the running back rankings. I did think that there was going to be more rushing touchdowns than just one.
Me too.
But I what I will say is this was almost a 3-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio with 28 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. And there's a lot more quarterbacks that are on this list that have a much worse touchdown to interception ratio. And Baker Mayfield's above 4,000 yards and one of the most prolific seasons out of Mike Evans to date coming this year with Baker Mayfield. He deserves to be on this list. They won a playoff game. I know this is based on the regular season, But just like a Michael Pittman scenario, I can't write the 2023 season without talking about Baker Mayfield right here. This isn't, which 10 guys would you start a franchise with? It's reflecting on the season from last year, and I believe Baker Mayfield deserves a spot in the top 10.
I love the pick. He's 10B, right? Like, he is my 10B. I flip-flop between him and Jalen Hurts so much. The reason I gave Jalen Hurts the edge is because of the touchdown potential. Yeah. And I get a lot of those are the tush-push, but it's also the ability to run the football for him. Baker's fine at running the football, but Jalen Hurts does it at an elite level at the quarterback position. Not the best in the league, but top 3, I would argue. So I got him here at 10. Steve at 9. It's crazy to think that the most passing yards out of a player I have at 9. And that's Tua Tagovailoa with 4,600 passing yards, 29 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, though. 14 interceptions on a team that's not always stretching the field like crazy. They like to throw the ball behind the line of scrimmage, or Tyreek burns people all the way down the field. And to just have that epic fall off, you could argue he could be higher on this list.
He is higher on my list.
He is higher on your list.
I don't want to say much higher, but compared to 9.
Sure. So I just overall not as impressed as I would have liked to have been. I expected more. I get no Waddle, but the run game helped carry them for a good portion of the season too.
They did, but you know what? I'm not going to sit here and default to that though, because he led the NFL in passing yards, and that's something that's extremely important for me. Like, with that whole scenario being the case, the presence of Mostert leading the NFL in touchdowns, Achane coming in and, running that West Coast offense while Tyreek Hill was still banged up. It's like, with Hill and Waddle inconsistently being in that lineup, was Cedric Wilson really catching balls like that? What's Dermot Smythe? Is he really catching balls like that? Like 4,600 yards, that's a shit ton of yards. I have to give Tua this credit and much higher on the list because this will likely be Tua's best season in his career. So if he's not getting this recognition now, he's not ever going to get that, and I'm not saying that he deserves it, but just like I said with Baker Mayfield, we can't address the 2023 season without understanding, I don't want to say the excellence, but the greatness coming out of Miami, because if Ryan Tannehill threw for 4,600 yards as part of that Miami team when he was the quarterback, we would have been praising him. But because it's Tua, I feel like he's not getting as much recognition.
Tua does get some of that shit. But I actually disagree with one of your statements there. I don't think this is going to be the best year of Tua's career.
Okay.
I do think he has potential to play better. I think that, and again, this is just going to sound terrible for Tua because it's not meant to. It's these passing yard numbers are tenfold because of what Tyreek's able to do after the catch, or even burning the defender where there's nobody by him, where when you have Tyreek Hill on your team, you got to be up there in the passing yards numbers. He's going to get you 1,500 guaranteed yards. Even hurt, he should have had 2,000, but he got hurt. I see,
but all the more in that perspective, if you can help create a 2,000-yard receiver like Matthew Stafford with Cooper Kupp and Calvin Johnson is being praised because that's the one quarterback that created 2 of the best wide receiver seasons of all time. So I'm not going to take that away from Tua for doing that to Tyreek because he's fast.
That's again, I get that. I just, I'm looking at him 29 touchdowns. I know 4 or 5 of those are shovel passes on the goal line. So again, that number's a little bit more. Again, 14 interceptions, not something you like to see. And also the inability to carry the team in the second half of the season when they desperately needed a quarterback to do so. Winners got to be taken into consideration here as well. They made it to the playoffs, but they had one of the more epic fall-offs, having such a giant lead over the Buffalo Bills and losing that division to the point where they have to play on the road with a guy who can't play in the cold.
The back end of the season, crumble was definitely, something that, the team was banged up, but a lot of that goes back to McDaniel. A lot of that goes back to Tua. I do know that you're going to have Josh Allen higher in the list. The dude almost had 20 interceptions.
I know.
It's really tough to just weigh that 14, knowing that most of these guys on this list are going to have 11 plus regardless. And I think we also need to keep in mind that this was coming off of last year where it wasn't even factual that Tua was going to be the quarterback for this year. 3 concussions, in and out of the lineup, to play 17 games and be the top passing yard leader in the NFL. That's a crazy transition, and it goes to show the work that he put in the offseason. I understand having him back a little bit, but I just feel like those lines in 101 passer rating and a 70% completion percentage, those are great numbers and a lot higher than a lot of other quarterbacks on this list.
And there's the whole aspect though of like, and again, it's not here because we saw it happen in Kansas City. Like there's half the season he's gonna have a tough time playing because he really struggles to play in bad weather. He really does struggle to play in bad weather. Where when you compare to Josh Allen like that, he can play in the bad weather. And the whole thing with Josh Allen is his legs. But we're going to get to Josh Allen much later down the road. Who do you got at 9?
9. I know it's going to be so much lower. This guy's probably top 5 for you. CJ Stroud is here at 9. What? Yeah, he's in your top 5.
Yeah, he's in my top 5. Yeah, he is.
So this is no disrespect to CJ Stroud. I just feel like when we're comparing some of these statistics, just looking on, has to be below a Tua with the passing yards. I do think what's really impressive is you have the passer rating here. I think that there was a lot of doubts early on in the year around the Texans and what they were able to do. And this is no disrespect to CJ Stroud. I just think he's going to have much better seasons. I'm not going to put him in the top 5, and then next year he throws for 5,200 yards and 30 touchdowns and say,
and he's won.
Yeah, but exactly. I just want to create more of like a build up and an establishment like with all of that. But he's mobile. He's not a guy that's extremely like impactful with the feet, but I feel like his ability to move around the pocket is part of what makes his game so special. Getting Stephon Diggs is going to be huge. I do think it's going to take away from Tank and Nico Collins a bit. I feel like Dalton Schultz will still have the same role, but I feel like that's a move to more get themselves respect from other teams in the AFC and be like, hey, like this is a legit contender. And even if Tank Dell doesn't come back fully healthy week 1 or something happens to Diggs or Nico Collins, that this guy has plenty to go around to help that success continue. And like I said, it was a great rookie year, but just looking at the numbers and comparing it with the rest of the list wasn't anything too crazy. He has the lowest interception number on the entire list, which is extremely impressive. But I do think early on it was more, I don't want to say conservative, but it wasn't as, oh, I'm going to sling this ball like wherever and just get it to these guys. I felt like that developed a little bit through the year, and that's why I have him more in the back end, because I do expect going forward that there's going to be improvement here. I think he's going to throw more than 4,100 yards next year. I think he's going to have more than 23 passing touchdowns next year. I expect all of that to improve with CJ Stroud, and I don't hate it if he's in your top 5. I just have different ways on how I want to address this.
I get that. I understand. I have a number of different reasons he's up there in my top 5, and you're going to see where he's not one. So I'm not going to just completely glaze. I'm going to get to why he's in the top 5 when I get there. But Steve, coming in at 8, people were calling for this guy to be MVP, but I don't even think he was the MVP of his team. Now, he played a good season, and he gets too much hate, much like Tua as well. He had a good season, and he's in the top 10 of quarterbacks, but he's a generational game manager. It's Brock Purdy here at 8.
Oh.
So Brock Purdy had a good season, 4,200 yards, 31 touchdowns, 11 turnovers or interceptions. He had 2 running with his feet. There were games where the Niners lost because Brock Purdy was not able to take that step to be the elite quarterback that would help win them the game. And that's where I bring him back. When you start to look up the rankings here past 7, so when you get 6 and up, these are guys that took over games for their own team or had insane season statistically as well. Brock Purdy had a great season. He had a ton of weapons, and he played perfectly in the role. He helped his team get to a 1 seed, but at the end of the day, he wasn't able to take the game over himself like we need to see quarterbacks do more often in the NFL.
I actually think that we have this conversation around Brock Purdy a lot. Like, I think we need to keep in mind that statistically, Jimmy Garoppolo didn't prove to be as successful as Brock Purdy was, and I understand that where Brock Purdy was selected is going to be consistent with a lot of the conversation surrounding him for a long time. Let's keep in mind that this was a very similar scenario. I'm not comparing him to Tom Brady, but Tom Brady was selected at the same spot and didn't really start getting that respect until 08, 09, 2010, and so on and so forth. Brock Purdy has the highest passer rating on this entire list by 10 points. I think that's something that we need to really, really consider, because that's not grading, this was an easy pass. That's the right decision, on top of that. And I feel like a lot of that's important. I don't think that Brock Purdy got the credit he deserved for this past season. If he plays like this again next year, he's a $45 million quarterback, and I think people need to understand that. Brock Purdy's top 3 on my list.
I think he's perennial top 10, but I don't think it was...
He's not a dominating guy.
Correct. He's not a dominating guy. And when I look
that.
at the top 5 guys on my list, they brought their teams to where they are.
He brought his team to the Super Bowl, though.
He brought his team to the Super Bowl with the help of a lot of people, but when there were games where it was like Brock Purdy's the one that needs to extend and make the play, Brock Purdy's the one that needs to make the throw, there were numbers of conversations saying he didn't do it. Now, I think he gets way too much crap. I think he's a perennial top 10 quarterback in the NFL. I think he's going to continue to get better. This season, kind of like Tua, not Tua, it's kind of like you have with Stroud, there's room for improvement. I see much better seasons coming. Not much, but I see better seasons coming from Purdy.
I actually feel like this, Purdy, I think he's close to his peak. If you're asking for a dude that's not overly talented or has that big arm ability or is mobile like that, I don't see him having a 5,000-yard passing season, regardless if they stay with that weapon or not. If Brock Purdy stays and gives me a 113 passer rating, above 4,000 yards, and a 3-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, I feel like that's pretty elite for what is being asked at the 49ers quarterback position.
I think you're going to get more clutch throws from him down the line, though. I absolutely do. I think now that he's been to the dance, he's been to the one game prior to the dance, he's had this experience where now it's like you see when at the quarterback position specifically, if you haven't been there, most of them crumble. I don't want to use the Ravens as an example, but like Lamar Jackson hadn't been to the point that he was at, and it looked like everything kind of got to him. I think Purdy's had those two major games.
I wouldn't hold that on Lamar.
There were games where you see like he took over in the regular season. I got to the Chiefs game. It's like the whole Ravens team fell apart. And when your team's falling apart, you got to look to your leader. Your leader's Lamar Jackson. I would have.
If Zay Jones scores that touchdown instead of fumbles, though, we're praising Lamar.
I see. I think there's a better. I think he should have had a better performance though. You can't live on that missed touchdown. You gotta. I know it's the next drive. Go out there, get the win.
They only had the ball for 9 minutes on the offensive side in the first half. So I just feel like how else can we fault Lamar, knowing in 9 minutes of offense in the matter of 30, how many points can you score in that?
But he's points, sure. But at the end of the day, extend plays longer. I get that the defense. I don't even want to say the defense failed them in the first half. It's just they did not call the right game. But part of being the quarterback is
call that though.
Yeah, but make that decision at the line sometimes. If you're the guy that's getting paid, it's like, no, this is the play that's going to work. I'm at the line. I'm seeing it. You have that conversation with Harbaugh after. And if it doesn't work, you're going to get reamed out for it. If it does work, that's what makes you the Mahomes level, the one that can control the game from the line of scrimmage.
I think Mahomes and Reed have a lot of conversations, but I think that there's checkdowns or audibles off of that play rather than changing the line completely at the line of scrimmage. And I'm not saying that Mahomes doesn't have that ability, because I believe that he does. But I also think at that same time, the Ravens are trying to instill a game plan to win 60 minutes and not the quarter. Lamar's really high on my list, and I'm sure he's at a great spot for you. But I do just think that there's scenarios there that cater to that rather than saying he could have just played better.
That's what I mean. Well, the game's not on Lamar. They didn't lose because of Lamar. They lost because of a litany of issues, because of Harbaugh, because of the rest, Zay Flowers making injuries, because the refs. No, I'm just kidding. But overall, the team played terrible. But when your team's playing terrible, you're going to look to the guy that is supposed to bring you where you need to go. Lamar Jackson is the guy on that team. It's just he's the guy you got to look at for everything at this point.
Yeah.
So,
but back to the Purdy deal. So you feel like Purdy is going to develop to be a guy that can be the best player on the field at that point in time? Because I don't feel like he's going to dominate or control a game the way Mahomes is ever in his career.
I don't know that he's going to be the best player on the field, but I think he's going to get to a point where he's going to limit a little bit. 11 turnovers in the NFL at this point in time, 11 picks, actually isn't that bad. It's pretty average to where everyone outside of the top
That's
outside
less
of
than
2 to
one
4
a
on this
game.
list. Yeah, it's less than 1 a game, and I think that he's going to be able to even dwindle that. I see him as a guy that will actually start throwing less than 10 interceptions each year. I see him as a guy that's going to, and he worked his skill players really well. I think he can get into the top 5 in the future, Steve. I don't think this was his best year, and I know you have him in the top 5 here. I think that there's more that Purdy can do, and I think there's going to be points where you're going to say, this is where Brock Purdy 2 years ago was not able to make that clutch throw to get the first down to extend the game longer, or to make that, deep downfield throw to the guy that, he actually made the decision to let his guy go up and get it. Like, I think there are just little things that you learn as a quarterback, trusting your players more, which I think he does well, but I think those little things he's going to be able to hone in as he gets more mature in the league, and that's where you're going to see the best Brock Purdy, when he nails in all the little things and can go out there and make that one clutch play that everyone's going to say, no more shit talking Brock Purdy. Because I do think he catches way too much shit. I'm a fan of Brock Purdy, but I'm looking at my list, and I just think there are guys that had better seasons than him. But it's up to you at 8 now.
Yeah,
So I'm not going to go into 10.
No, yeah, it's all good. And just part of the reason with Purdy, though, is because I feel like the core that surrounds him is only going to get worse as he gets off that rookie deal. Like, let's keep in mind,
Sure.
this isn't a guy that's on a 5-year rookie contract. Going into next season, there's going to be contract conversations with Brock Purdy. It might not be that $60 million number that we're talking about with a Hurts or a Lamar or a Burrow or anything like that, but it's going to be less realistic to pay a guy like Debo, like Ayuk, like Kittle, like McCaffrey, all around the core like that. And I think that's what we need to keep in mind is when Purdy's contract number changed, the skill players around him are going to change, and that's going to affect the level of production that he creates, which is why I feel like right now, with that amount of talent, this is likely one of the better cores that he'll ever have in his career. And we need to keep in mind, there's quarterbacks on this list that'll never have a core like that ever in their career.
Sure.
So that's part of my conversation. But you're right, at 8, let's get back to the list. This is where I have Jordan Love. No disrespect to Love. I think that he's a great quarterback, one of the more promising young prospects in the league. With Stroud and Love, these are two of the guys I would consider building a franchise with tomorrow if that question got asked to me. I had them here on the back end because this is just the beginning of their career. But I think Jordan Love had a great start. You came into the year, there was a lot of controversy. People were saying, oh, Minnesota, oh, the Lions. The second half of the season, after the first 5 weeks, the Green Bay Packers turned it up. They went on a little skid.
Yep.
But Jordan Love has the skill set, he has the composure, and he fits in with Green Bay so perfectly. I think this is a guy that's eventually going to be top 3 on this list. If he had a Devontae Adams right now, he might already be up in that conversation. It's really tough to say that I have Love above Stroud, but I felt like there's not a chance in the world the Packers would be where they are without Jordan Love. And I'm not saying that that's not the same case for C.J. Stroud. I just think Stroud had a better surrounding core than Jordan Love did, which is why I wanted to give Love a little bit more credit on this list. Over 4,000 passing yards in his first season as a starter, 4 points shy of 100 passer rating. Not as mobile with the feet, but can definitely make you miss. He has 4 touchdowns on the ground. So 36 touchdowns, 11 interceptions in a season that has 17 games. Anything under 11 or less interceptions, I feel like is a very prominent number.
Yeah.
Jordan Love is one of my favorite quarterbacks on this list. And I also wrote down here sack numbers. Think it's good to note that Jordan Love had 30 compared to Stroud, who had 38. Baker had 40. So he sacked a little bit less, a little bit more of an opportunity. I expect that to be a focal point for both the Bucs and the Texans going forward.
Yeah. I'm going to talk about Jordan Love later because I'm going to have to defend where he is on the list.
You don't have to defend it. Look, Jordan Love is a little bit more of the conversation, but I knew that we were going to have drastic differences based on this list and where we were having conversations prior. So.
Yeah. I mean, well, at 7, we're probably going to be pretty damn close here.
8?
No, 8 was Purdy.
Okay.
So at 7, one step above him, you're going to hate this dude. I got Jared Goff here at 7.
No, I don't hate it. I have a little bit higher, but
I think Jared Goff had a career resurgence in Detroit. And again, we saw flashes of him playing better last year. This year, he really picked up the play. 30 touchdowns, 12 picks, but really did a good job of letting the run game help take over. But Steve, I think he's number 2 on this list in passing yards with 4,575.
He is.
So really, really good season. And I just thought when it came down to big moments, Jared Goff did an excellent job of stepping up and making things happen.
Couldn't agree more.
Not to mention the leadership that Jared Goff has. His troops rally behind him. He is through and through. And then after the bullshit that they had to deal with the Cowboys and the bad call, you hear Jared Goff go to the media. They were just on to the next game. He's like, yeah, I just don't think it was a good call, but we got to go out and we got to win the next game.
Yeah.
And he brought them deep in the playoffs. I know this is a regular season ranking, but he brought them deep into the playoffs when people were counting out Detroit.
Yeah.
Detroit came through. They needed a quarterback to play the way that they played this year. Jared Goff elevated his game to a new level this year.
And I feel like the way that Goff is playing right now really adds to the trade and the conversation that the Lions and the Rams did, because people really counted Goff out. They were like, oh, he can't win in that big moment. Look at that Rams team, this and that. And, he's the reason why they're not getting to, the dance multiple times. But I feel like this Goff has never had more control over a team or never enhanced the players like the way he did this past year. I'm actually shocked because I thought you were going to give him a little bit more love recognition. I don't hate the 7th spot, but I do just feel like this is one of his more prestigious seasons. You're talking about Amon-Ra, 1,500 yards. You're talking about rookie and Sam Laporta, who literally caught for 1,000. A backfield that was able to be absolutely complimentary to all of that. And Dan Campbell making sure that these guys are set up for success in multiple different ways. So I'm going to talk about Goff a little bit later. My 7, you're going to disagree drastically, but we talked about the numbers that are going to make him at this spot. This is where I have Josh Allen here at 7. 18 interceptions is way too much. If Daniel Jones threw 18 interceptions, he would be like on
32.
Like whatever the case may be. Like it would be crazy. So I just feel like even though Josh makes crazy plays, they were put in such a poor scenario this year because of a lot of his bad decisions. Like, realistically, there's no reason why Buffalo shouldn't have had 14, 15 wins this year based on the season that they had and some of the dumbass mistakes that they actually made. I'm happy that some of those mistakes are made because Kev got to go through a table because of it. So we always want to appreciate that experience. But it was a great season from Josh Allen. I mean, you want to talk about crazy total touchdowns. He had 44 that he was responsible for. So that's an insane amount. But still, that's only a 2-to-1 interception ratio, throwing 18. I think there's going to be a lot of drastic differences. Now, no Stephon Diggs. You have young core in Shakir and Kincaid and James Cook, and I'm sure they're going to continue to add to that wide receiver position in the draft and maybe a couple veteran free agent guys. But I couldn't give Josh Allen a top 5 nod knowing that there were a lot of mistakes made throughout the season. And I don't think that it's his best year either. I know that you're going to talk about Josh Allen in a much different manner than I am. And Kev, this is no disrespect to Josh by any means because you know what I feel about his ability. But it still comes down to him being, the second fiddle as far as like those big games go. I just really was impressed by the guys' seasons, above him. If this interception number is 12 instead of 18, you're talking about at least 4 spots higher.
18 is obviously way too much, and I shit on Josh Allen's turnovers like nothing you've ever seen all the time.
Fumbles, too.
At the end of the day, I do think he was the only one doing it on that team. I think Diggs had a good half of the season, fell apart. He found a way to work in tight ends. You're going to hear where I got him a little bit later on. We got some different placements for him. So that's good because when the wide receiver rankings came out way too similar, we knew that something had to change.
Going wrong.
Something had to change.
Yeah.
At 6, because this was his worst season I've seen him play, with a less than 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. Just over 4,000 yards. I get it was a more depleted roster than he's had in years past. But he didn't have the year that we were all expecting. He wasn't the MVP of this year. Fuck all. He wasn't even close. This was the worst season that he was Super Bowl MVP. Now, playoffs are a completely different story with this guy. But in the regular season, this dude was having a miserable time. His team was struggling to win games. He was struggling to carry them without the little referees. But
stop it.
Patrick Mahomes is here at 6, Steve.
Okay. I don't think it's a horrible spot. I'm not going to give you, too much about this. I have him just a couple of spots higher, so nothing too crazy. He's not the one on the year, so I just want to make sure that you know and understand that. My thing with Patrick Mahomes that still keeps him in the top 5 is moments for me, right? And some of those moments for Patrick Mahomes, even though this was the most mistakes we've seen him make this year on the year with 14 interceptions, some of those wow or spectacular plays I feel like do compensate for more of that. And a quarterback, any other quarterback that's in that scenario isn't taking them to the Super Bowl. So I feel like we still do need to keep in mind the numbers were a little bit down. I understand that. I respect it. Travis Kelce was selected, in fantasy drafts with high expectations. Yep. He was still a great tight end this year, but wasn't to the level that we thought. The Rashee Rice development is very, very, very encouraging. And,
very good.
Adding Hollywood Brown to the mix going on to this year should mean, I don't want to say drastic improvement, but we like to see Mahomes sit around at least 4,400 yards,
100%.
So he's a little bit under
He's
that.
got to have over 30 touchdowns. Pat Mahomes needs to have over 30 touchdowns.
I agree.
And I think this year at 32, you got to think they're taking a receiver. I mean, imagine how dangerous someone like Xavier Worthy would be on Kansas City.
Yeah, I'm not sold that it has to be a wide receiver, especially adding Hollywood, knowing that Rashee Rice was drafted a little bit later. Honestly, I feel like guys like Nick Bolton, McDuffie, Karlaftis, all those sneaky defenders that they get at the back end of one make a huge part to their team, and I think that's their formula. I feel like that's their strategy. Look, if we look at their draft process consistently, Sky Moore was a mid-round wide receiver. Sure. Rashee Rice is a mid-round wide. I don't think it's a drastic need, and I honestly felt like they addressed it. Yeah, there's questions with Rashee Rice, but yes, I don't think that they're going to change their formula because of that. Because look, even in rounds 5 or 6 that they're finding a guy like Pacheco, I'm not saying that's going to happen every year, but that's at least the idea that they're going for, right? And I feel like where you have to overcompensate for a guy like Patrick Mahomes who's making $500 million through the course of his contract, you can't give all those offensive guys top-tier money. And I think that's part of the plan of getting those guys later is you have to make sure that you have some defensive studs, and that's why they go in that direction a little bit early on.
I will just say with wide receiver this year, though, they have an opportunity at 32 to take an insanely good wide receiver that will make them dangerous for years and years to come. Now, I get the Hollywood signing's good for him. We don't know what's going to happen with Rashee Rice, but it's Kansas City, and Andy Reid always finds a way to sweep the shit under the rug.
I don't think it's going to I think if he gets suspended, I don't think it's more than 2 games.
Probably not, no. But I just...
That's if he does.
Mentally, too, but I just think if you can see one of these receivers, and it doesn't have to be X-worthy, right? It can be a Donnie Mitchell if he's down there. How can you pass up on top talent like that?
I mean, that's
Troy Franklin's a good guy.
Yeah.
There are guys that could fall down because you got to think offensive line is super deep in this draft too. So if teams go on runs with that, it's just going to be curious. I think Kansas City at 32 is in the best spot at 32 that they've been in years past.
And I also just feel like in this scenario, they could listen to teams that might want to move up for a Penix or a Knicks to get that extra year of a contract and get one of the best guys starting in day 2. I feel like there's a lot of different opportunities to go, but regardless, I feel like we can't have this Patrick Mahomes conversation without talking about the beginning of a dynasty here. And look, I know that's not the way that you always want to carry this conversation.
It's true, though. It's 100% true. As much I'll shit on them all day because it's the one team that Goodell actually likes that's good, but they are good. They're really fucking good. And this year was not they were supposed to kind of skid a little bit this year, and they won the Super Bowl.
They did kind of skid a little bit this year.
And they got to the playoffs. They had the best player in any game of the playoffs. They had not great weapons around him, but they had that good defense. They had the best quarterback, and they just went out there and they won their games.
Just
fair and square too. I just fucking
taking it to Tom Brady, right? They've had 10-6 or 11-5 seasons that they went on to the dance, and whether they came away with the game or not, being the best player in that moment always makes a difference. And that's why it's really hard for me to have him outside the top 5. At 6, it's really not that big of a deal for me. Like I said, only a couple spots ahead. 6 is where I have Tua. I talked about it a little bit earlier. I'm not going to go into drastic in-depth with Tua. I think it was a really great year for him, and I just feel like 4,600 yards in a year where quarterbacks were really struggling to get, much higher than 4,300. I have to give some credit to that. And look, you could have Tyreek Hill on your team. I think it would be more of an impression to me if you didn't have a good season with Tyreek Hill. So I'm not going to hold it against Tua for having a good season with him. I actually feel like that's how it's supposed to go. I don't see Tyreek Hill being a guy that's going to have like another 5 years in the league. Like, I don't know what it is. I just don't see that. So these next 2 years that we're getting with him, if they do try and add an Odell Beckham, that's an all-in approach. When they pay Tua $50 million or $40 million, if he gets that long-term contract, things are going to drastically change in Miami. Right. So that's going to be different. I'm going to shift to 5 since we already had a strong conversation about Tua. This is where I have Jared Goff. Has to be talked about in the top 5 here. We talked about the Lions so much this year because they were one of your favorite teams going into the season.
Oh, yeah.
One of. Had to put a pause on that. But I want to give this guy his flowers. Like, he absolutely deserves that, and it would have been so easy for him to just take the money, just play in Detroit. Even if he had 7-win seasons, that would have been better than anything that they would have had. But they continue to push the bar, strive for greatness. This is a team that's a serious contender in the NFC going forward with the way that their franchise has really been built. And there was a lot of adversity for Jared Goff to overcome, and he did that smoothly. He's not here for the noise. He don't care about your conversations or anything like that. Jared Goff just wants to shut up and put in work. This is a guy that was sacked 30 times, even though that's considered one of the better offensive lines. I would like to see that number be a little bit less. Like, anything above 28, I feel like is much because you're talking about more than 2 sacks a game. Look, I know the defense has to put up some numbers too, but I just feel like for the amount of and I guess when you consider like quarterbacks are throwing around 30 times a game, like that's really not that much, but still, like it is a drastic number. Almost 4,600 passing yards, just less than 100 shy under Tua is very, very, very impressive. I will say that it's going to be hard to repeat a better season than that, but I do feel like they have the core to improve. I would like them to win more important games, but you know, the expectation is that the Lions, with what they established last year, this is a team that isn't going to be one and done in the playoffs. This is a team that's going to make some noise and push for that NFC Championship again. This was most definitely a top 5 season out of Jared Goff. I don't know how much more he can elevate his game, but something's really promising around Detroit.
Love Detroit so much. Love that spot for him. Steve, at 5 for me. Same division, different quarterback. 32 touchdowns, 11 picks, 4 rushing touchdowns, almost 250 rushing yards. And his first season as a full-time starter, Jordan Love made a massive impact this season. And I want to talk about something similar to that you talked about. I don't want to say we rode off Green Bay, but Green Bay wasn't expected to be a contender, let alone make a playoff push, let alone take San Francisco, who went to the Super Bowl, to a one possession game
for less than 2 minutes left.
Right. It's insane. Like, this guy took a team that we looked at and we said, these weapons fucking suck. His best one that they paid, Aaron Jones, was gone for almost all the year. Then he makes Romeo Doubs have his best season. He lets Jaden Reed have the opportunity to flourish in that offense. We saw good games out of Dontavian Wicks. Luke Musgrave, when he was healthy, had some good games. Tucker Kraft had good games. He really elevated this Green Bay team to the point where that team was hopeful. They saw, damn, we have a quarterback right after Aaron Rodgers, and there was nothing that hurt. Like, they're in a really, really good spot where they can add more pieces and take an even bigger step. I thought Jordan Love had an awesome season, and I still think he has the potential to do even better and crack top 3 next year.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And Love is one of the more promising guys, and I feel like a lot of this testament, you have to give some kudos to Matt LaFleur, right?
Absolutely.
He's come in and he's not in that Sean McVay conversation, but he damn well deserves to be. Like, I don't want to hear McVay or Shanahan's name brought up without that dude, because I get the whole transition, the back end of Aaron Rodgers. It got like a little weird.
It was dicey. It was a little dicey.
This has been the most successful coach since starting in the league, and there's no controversy about it. I would like to see that defense be a little bit better, but we also need to keep in mind they brought back that Green Bay identity. A tough place to go and play in November and December. A team that's going to play you to the last whistle. If they improve that pass rush, make sure that they get young offensive linemen to keep Jordan Love. I don't even care if they get a dominant X wide receiver. If they keep a group or an abundance of players, Jordan Love has showed us that he can really facilitate that ball around and also step up to moments. Not only is he going to be one of the better players in fantasy football for years to come, he's going to be one of the better quarterbacks or players in the league for a long time. So love that positioning there. I don't want to say that he didn't deserve top 5. I just feel like I want him to flourish into that a little bit more. So you
want to watch it make that big jump into your top 5.
Yes,
I got you.
I absolutely do.
And same thing with CJ Stroud,
exactly,
right?
Exactly. So that's a lot of like my reasoning there. For a guy like Baker Mayfield, I'm not expecting that. Like that, what we got from him this year, if he gave us that, if he give us the same exact season next year, he probably wouldn't even be on this list. I swear to God, depending on the way other quarterbacks obviously went.
Right, because you're going to get Burrow, you're going to get Caleb Williams.
Yes.
Like, this is a weird year for quarterbacks, too.
Are you already talking about Caleb Williams in this conversation?
We're going to talk more at draft time, but I'm going to tell you right now, I do think Caleb Williams is going to be the best quarterback in that draft, and I think he's going to be a generational talent. I really think he's going to live up to all the hype.
And do you think that in that first year that he's going to get 7+ wins as a Chicago Bear?
I do.
Do you?
I think Chicago Bears are a sneaky wildcard team.
Wow.
I think there are 3 teams in that NFC. Lou said something in the mock draft, and I actually semi-agree. I think the AFC North is the best division.
Wow.
I think NFC North is too.
Okay.
I think the NFC North is very good. I'm not, and he brought up a good point about Minnesota. Is like as long as O'Connell's there and as long as they have the best receiver in the NFL, it's hard to just completely write him off as an easy win.
Yeah.
You got Chicago, who's got a good defense. They have great young pieces, and now they have a core around their new young quarterback. You have the Packers that we saw what they did. They're only getting better. You had the Lions, who look really good this year, and it's going to be hard for them to do anything but regress. But we're pulling for the Lions still, baby.
Before we really crack this top tier to the list, you talked about the mock draft a little bit. Were there any picks that you either loved or strongly disliked from that mock draft that you recall off the top?
There was a point where someone said, I don't know if it was you or Lou, where you guys were like, I don't think Cooper DeJean's that good. And I was sitting there, I'm like, I think he's the fucking man. Like, 2 picks later, he got drafted.
Yeah, no, he did. And it might have been me. It might have been a little like, I just feel like let's compare this to like an Isaiah Simmons scenario, right? When you're blessed with being able to play multiple positions, I feel like scouts and executives in the NFL, they see that as versatility, but what they also see that as is not dominant at one position because you have the skill set to play both. I feel like that's going to be like his type of conversation. And look, like you can criticize me all you want. I don't think he has the mold to line up with a dude like fucking Devontae Adams on the outside. I think if he was isolated on the outside, he would get cooked by Devontae Adams.
I don't think he's the best lockdown corner. 100. That's Terry and Arnold for me.
Yeah.
Like that's Terry and Arnold through and through for me. But I think that his versatility, yes, I actually completely agree with that point. Is like coaches will see that as like, well, what is he? Like we don't know what he is. But if he goes to the right team that finds that role for him,
absolutely,
he will be an absolute monster. He needs to go somewhere where I think they already have a good defense built, and he gets plugged in, and he's going to be a fucking problem.
Don't think it's going to happen, but like Baltimore would be a perfect scenario. They would put him up in perfect scenarios to be successful.
Kyle Hamilton up top, that'd be fucking awesome.
If he went to like a shit team like the Chargers or the Saints, like I think he would. I'd
fall apart.
Yes,
I don't disagree. I don't entirely disagree.
But you could say that with a lot of these draft prospects, right? Like you could say that, and that's why you have like Shedeur Sanders and like a lot of these young players saying, oh, like I really might pull an Eli Manning because guess what? That first 3 years of that team that you were drafted to are so important to the dollars that you make going forward. Like look at N'Keal Harry. He wasn't ever going to get a chance to be successful in that scenario or after that because of his reputation.
I know.
Even in the Giants scenario, like you can look back in years past, like Jalen Hyatt, for example. I don't want to sit here and say that he's a lost cause by any means, but we have too many problems to help make him successful that are going to restrict his value going forward.
Absolutely.
Back to the rankings. We got a lot of draft stuff coming on. I talked about Mahomes at 4 for me, so this is his positioning right above Jared Goff. 3 is where I have Brock Purdy. This is where I think he deserves to be. Only 2 quarterbacks above him that I think should have been talked about on this list. I don't think that Purdy was in the MVP conversation. I think that Christian McCaffrey should have likely been in that conversation over him. But that doesn't mean that I can't have Brock Purdy in here as a top 5 quarterback season. If he gave me 113 passer rating, a 70% completion percentage, 4,000 yards, 30 touchdowns every single year, like I'm good with that, knowing the way that the 49ers are shaped. Their formula for success, play defense, run the football, don't turn it over. They legit drafted Lance to do that, and he couldn't do that. They found Purdy, and he was able to make that transition. That's why I think he deserves so much more credit, because he was drafted to be nothing. Absolutely nothing, and he comes in here, and I actually feel like Caleb Williams isn't going to have the success that Brock Purdy has. Keep in mind, he's not going to be surrounded by the same type of core, the same type of, respectful or podium-esque type of organization. But I feel like all of that comes into play when, selecting a prospect like this, and all of this is part of their career. This is a great season from Brock Purdy, and I wasn't going to let it just get swept under the rug. If he keeps playing like this, they're going to keep making NFC Championship games. There's moments in those games that I don't want to say that he has to be better, but we thought that a move for Chase Young or something like that was going to be a lot more impactful than it was. That really wasn't the case. And there were a couple.
Can't blame Purdy for that, obviously. Right.
No, and I just feel like nobody expected Brock Purdy to lead his team to the NFC Championship. The fact that in the Super Bowl, the fact that he did, I think it's a testament to his play. I cannot talk about the 2023 NFL season without talking about how great Brock Purdy played, and he absolutely played better than Jalen Hurts did this year.
100%. Absolutely 100%. That's why he was above him.
Yeah.
At 4, and I'm sure that this is going to be your 2, Dak Prescott.
Yes, he is my 2.
Dak had an unbelievable season. I do think this was one of his best years.
Yes.
One that you could argue the year with Dez and Zeke, but again, those numbers weren't ridiculous. He just kind of came into a role and really flourished. This year, he was an absolute dominant force. Love seeing sub 10 turnovers from Dak Prescott. That was a big thing he got shat on all 4 last year, and he ends up with 9. He has 9 interceptions thrown this year.
What'd you say about Dak before the season when we talk about fantasy football?
I disrespected his ass, dude. He wasn't even in the top 15. Was he top 15? No. Disrespected. And you know what? I'm going to fucking eat it. He's here at 4. 4,500 yards, 36 touchdowns, 9 picks. Brought CeeDee Lamb into where he needed to fucking be. He brought CeeDee to where he needed to be. Now, they didn't run the ball well enough, and that's where the Dallas's downfall was. You can't blame Dak for that. Dak went in there, did his job tenfold, did much better than people expected, to the point where last year, if you were saying Dak can't get fucking paid another 45, 50 million, well, think about it now, because he just fucking helped your team get to where they needed to be. Say what you want about the playoffs. In the regular season, Dak had a top 5 season, and I do want to say, when you're looking at this top 5 list, it's like this.
Yeah.
It's all razor thin.
Oh, it's
you can
so
interchange any of these guys. I would argue you can interchange most of these guys in the top 8 here.
Yeah.
Top 7, top 8 here. But when you look at this top 5, it's really, really damn close.
It is.
So just because I have Dak at 4, and then I'm going to go, or you go into Dak, I'll talk about my number 3 after, but when you go 3, 2, 1, these guys are all right next to each other.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I don't think that you could ask Dak Prescott to do much more for that Cowboys team.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that they were great in moments. I know that there's a lot of controversy right now because the Dallas Cowboys aren't sitting here paying Dak Prescott a contract extension or anything like that. They're going to let the year play out. That's perfectly fine. If Dak even has a slightly less successful season as he does this year, he's going to get $50 million in the open market regardless of where it is. So I feel like that's something that he needs to keep in mind. I do feel like a lot of his success does come because he's part of the Cowboys organization, but we need to understand that 2 years ago they had a running identity and Dak was just complementing that, making the right plays and doing play action. This year, they entirely switched that, transformed that. CeeDee Lamb we had as our number 1 wide receiver or number 2 wide receiver, whatever it was, in the positional rankings. Without Dak at his quarterback, that's not the case this year. Ferguson got established in a role. Brandon Cooks had his best season in probably 3 or 4 years with the Dallas Cowboys. I know a lot of this does come down to moments and being in Jerry's world or whatever the hell it is down in Dallas. But this was a great season. This was a dude that got sacked the most on the list, 39 sacks, which is a really, really high number. I know that offensive line hasn't been what it was, and they didn't have the ground game that they did last year that they probably would have liked. But you can't really ask for a much better season out of Dak Prescott. Right. And I think that for a large part of the year, he was in the MVP conversation. We know the way that all played out and everything else, but This was really, really impressive. A 70% completion percentage. The second highest passer rating on the list after a Brock Purdy with a 106. He has the foot potential. Just under 40 touchdowns. This was a touchdown away or 2 touchdowns away from being a 4-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio.
Nuts.
Crazy.
Nuts.
Crazy.
Unbelievable speeds. And speaking of 4-to-1, how about 4.5-to-1 touchdown interception ratio out of C.J. Stroud, the rookie? One of the best rookie quarterback seasons that I have seen play out. And he did it with a team that, now we had thought that there was a chance that Texans could have been great, but it was one that we said with not much risk because it was like, well, if they don't, people aren't expecting them to do well. You look at the Houston Texans, C.J. Stroud went in there and changed that entire organization to the point where they're Super Bowl contenders now. Yeah. To the point where a guy like Stephon Diggs, who is known to be a fucking diva, I'm not going to shit on his play. I'm not going to shit on his personality because I like a dude that has passion for the sport, but someone who can get worked up over nothing. And he wants to go to a team with a second-year quarterback because now they have a Super Bowl chance.
Also want to credit a lot to DeMeco Ryans.
DeMeco Ryans.
Bobby Slowick.
DeMeco Ryans is arguably in the Coach of the Year conversation, as always. But C.J. Stroud, Rookie of the Year, was in conversation for MVP if he didn't miss 2 games. The guy had 4,100 yards. Yeah, only 23 touchdowns, but 5 interceptions?
Yeah.
It's the lowest number on this list, and he's a rookie, and I get they were conservative at points.
I think both touchdown and interceptions were both conservative numbers, but I do feel like if he has a 3-to-1 with like a 30-10 or 35-11 for a ratio, that's what I feel like the expectation. I think both of those numbers, I don't want to say the interceptions improve. I think that's a little bit higher. Having 5 interceptions in the course of 17 games is a very, very, very small number. They're going to pass the ball
way more.
Yeah, so I absolutely think he's going to improve on both of those numbers there.
Stay under 10, though. I still see him with the way he plays the game. I can still see him staying under 10. And when you talk about fucking talent, dude, this dude screams perfect quarterback talent. He throws an incredible ball. He can see the field incredibly well. He leads his team, dude. He is a charismatic dude, good dude. The media loves him. Like, this guy is a superstar, Steve.
Yeah.
He is going to be a generational quarterback for years to come. I'm going to go out on a limb and say this guy is going to make top 10 quarterback of all time after year 1. I think he's going to get himself into that cover. Now, it's a hot take because he's played 1 fucking year. I think he's going to get there, Steve. I think he's going to get there. I think you're ultimately going to start talking about him the same way that we're talking about Pat Mahomes when you're talking about 5 years down the road.
You're talking about after 1 season, C.J. Stroud is going to be in the conversations with the Joe Montanas, Tom Brady's, Peyton Manning's.
Top 10, not top 5.
Well, they're all within the top 10, though, right?
Correct. They're within the top 10. I think you're going to start talking about them around the Rodgers and the Mahomes, and Mahomes will end up getting into that level. I'm confident of that. But you're going to talk about him in that Rodgers conversation, in the Favre conversation, in the Elway conversation. I think you're going to start talking about him in those conversations.
I think that there's a lot of moments that need to happen throughout his career before we can say that. I think he has the potential and the trajectory to do so. But for a Houston Texans organization, I don't want to jump that gun just yet because I feel like there's a difference from successful organizations or like kind of what we've seen from like Philly and Cincy in recent years, right? Like they have that quarterback, they build that talent around them, they get to the dance, but a lot of the time when we see some of these young quarterbacks get to the dance early in their career, they don't make it back. So, like, I hope that that's not the case for him. The AFC is just real competitive, and it's going to be really tough to be better than Patrick Mahomes in a lot of moments, knowing he has experience being successful doing so. I want that for C.J. Stroud. Don't get me wrong. I just think those are lofty. Like, let's talk about, like, an MVP or, like, getting to the Super Bowl before we go top 10 of all time first.
In MVP conversation this year, probably, I would give him the 5 if I were to do 5 MVPs. But if you were to rank 5 people at MVP, I think I'd give him number 5.
I would still put Goff ahead of him in that conversation. I'd have Purdy ahead of him for this year.
I think I'd have Purdy ahead of him.
Yeah, in this
and
conversation.
I'd have CMC. CMC and Purdy are like my 2 and 4. But regardless, back to C.J. Stroud. One of the things that makes this such a great opportunity to jump his name into those conversations, I'm going to use your point. The Texans have been historically a terrible organization. What makes greatness is flipping the entire organization upside down. C.J. Stroud has the ability to do that. DeMeco Ryans with him has the ability to do that. But C.J. Stroud has all the talent to make him a great quarterback all time. Now at 2,
Don't do it.
I did it. I did it, dude. I have the MVP here at 2. 1B, I have the MVP here. 24 touchdowns. 4-1. 821 rushing yards. 5 rushing touchdowns. Steve, the only reason I have Josh Allen above him is because Josh Allen had 44 total touchdowns. The interceptions piss me off to no degree. I understand that. But his team gave up on him halfway through the season, and he solely made that push to make the playoffs and give Kansas City their toughest game outside of San Fran.
Do I need to remind you that we were this is the same Lamar Jackson that people were talking about. Oh, he's going to get traded. Oh, he doesn't deserve that money. Legit, right to the AFC Championship, right through the Buffalo Bills, steamrolled your Detroit fucking Lions 35-0.
We weren't saying that, though. We were high on Lamar Jackson.
You were saying that.
I was anti-Ravens. I was very high on Lamar Jackson. Very, very high on Lamar Jackson. We can get the receipts, but very high on Lamar Jackson.
I was saying that, and that's why Lamar is here at 1. Look, I don't want to hear nothing about the passing ability, a 102 passer rating, top 4 on this list. He had over 4,500 total yards. You want to talk about the total touchdowns, almost a 1,000-yard rushing season on top of it. Lost his running backs again, developed a rookie receiver successfully, can still have the same questions on, like he's not surrounded with that 1A X wide receiver. He's not the reason that they lost in those moments. The second highest sack number on the list in 37. I thought that Josh Allen had a great season, but you can't make 20-plus mistakes in a season, knowing that this dude made 2 more than C.J. Stroud, and take that away from him, knowing he made it further than Josh Allen with I would say, a less of a offensive core.
But this is not taken away from Lamar. This is not about what Lamar didn't do. This is about what Josh Allen did do for me. The fact that he literally did it himself. That Buffalo Bills team, I've been saying it, Steve, it's fucking dog shit. Josh Allen is the only thing they have going for them, especially now that Diggs is gone. But Diggs was also dog shit when he got to the back half of the season. That's why he wasn't in our top 10 receiver rankings. Spoiler. But there's a reason. He did not have more than 8 games where he was great. Josh Allen, yes, the turnovers are terrible. But take away the turnovers, and Josh Allen is just walking through.
What other quarterback in the NFL or what other player in the NFL have you ever deemed the best that season with the most amount of turnovers? Because it's never happened ever.
Yeah, maybe not. I just think, I mean, you look at the quarterback position this year, it got thinner because of injuries, but we got the opportunity to see a lot of people flourish to the point where we get to see a lot of these young guys step up. What I just saw out of Josh Allen is the ability to take his team to win a game by himself when he has to. The ability to be down 3 games with 5 to play, go win your division, and then win that tough playoff game to get a chance to take the shot at KC. They lost.
But he also put them in that scenario, though. He put, there were multiple games where...
I can't put that all on Josh Allen the same way that I can't...
You can't put New England game on Josh Allen.
In part.
Come on.
There's more than Josh Allen.
As a Patriots fan,
they have a terrible coach. Dude, McDermott's terrible. The second Dable left, they started having these problems. I don't want to blame it on Allen. I don't think it's as much Allen's issue as it is the actual coaching staff and the organization of the Buffalo Bills.
I know, but you can't say that a head coach for another team is the reason why that Josh Allen, that's just like...
It's not
over.
The reason, but again, it's like he had 18 turnovers. If he has 12 turnovers, it's different. He had a lot of turnovers. I understand that. But
I just think
take that away, dude. This is a ridiculous season. You take that away.
Absolutely.
You cut that a quarter down.
If he has 12 interceptions, not only does that change the turnover numbers, but it changes their wins and losses, and that's what's so impactful to me. Is I think Josh Allen's mistakes is the difference in 3 wins for them this season. Realistically, yes, Miami should have won that division, and yes, they fucking blew it, but the Buffalo Bills also blew it at the beginning of the year, starting the way that they did and struggling throughout. Knowing that you have a 1 wide receiver, they had, in my positional rankings, a top 5 running back. Yeah, they have a dog shit head coach, but they don't have the worst defense either. I just feel like Josh Allen is too talented to have 24-plus turnovers in a season, being in the conversations he's had, knowing the head-to-head matchups he's had with Mahomes and Burrow through the course of these careers. You want to talk about being great in moments? I can't sit here and say that you're great in moments knowing that you've turned the ball over and been the cause of being on the back end of those moments.
But I'm looking at scores here, 44 scores. The only person that's close is Jalen Hurts, who didn't make your list, rightfully so. I have him here at 10 because of the ability to score. They get in the red zone. He is the hardest person to stop in the red zone because his ability to throw the ball, his ability to run the ball, and you don't want to come up and hit the dude because he will just barrel you over.
Yeah.
I'm taking that all into consideration. I like the ability to score at the quarterback position. I want his turnovers turned down tenfold. I agree, but I liked his ability to score. That's why I had him at 1. The MVP is Lamar Jackson, but I think that Josh Allen had his, I don't want to say his best season, but he had a season where nothing was going right for the Buffalo Bills except for Josh Allen.
I hear all that. I obviously have to explain why, I just disagree with that, and I feel like my
totally
positioning where I have him, I absolutely agree. If these numbers were a quarter less than what they are, you're talking about a drastic difference. But I just feel like he put his team in scenarios, and yeah, I get it. Sometimes you as a quarterback, you have to make not always the right play, but the stretch play to try and get some of those differences. But just feel like it happened too many times, and not even against great teams either.
Right.
There's scenarios. I'm pretty sure that they struggled with a game versus the Jets too, or another horrible team.
They did.
And that's
Giants.
What?
They struggled against the Giants.
Exactly. That can't happen. Absolutely not. As a Giants fan, the Buffalo Bills and Josh Allen, that can't happen too. But at 1, Lamar Jackson, absolutely deserving so. The most valuable player for the Baltimore Ravens, the most valuable player in the entire NFL this past season. Lamar Jackson deserves the 1 spot, deserves all the love and recognition. They absolutely, positively fell short of their goal and expectation. And part of that is on Lamar, but like we reflected on in that conversation, you have to change your script, your game plan, and all the scenarios, knowing that you only had the ball for 1/3 of the first half of the game, and that's drastically important. Since the Sandbox fans, this is gonna wrap things up for our entire Positional Rankings Series. Thank you for following along from our very first episodes of the safeties through the defense, now to the quarterbacks. As we approach the draft, we have so many more mock drafts and other draft conversations coming out to you guys. Check that out on our podcast, Apple, Spotify. Subscribe to the YouTube to watch the episodes. And for all your UFC 300 content, go check out Sandbox MMA. You guys know the deal. Peace, love, 5 stars, nothing less.